Have you lost the connection with your higher self? Are you noticing the dis-ease of the outside world? It's time to reconnect with nature and each other and raise our consciousness, vibration, and frequency. Together we can create a world of peace and abundance. It's Spiritual Revolution Radio with your host, Dr. Will Miller.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. I have Lois Hollis on with us today. She has two films out. The first is Out of Discord into Harmony, and the second is I'm Good. Now, Out of Discord into Harmony talks about how you communicate with your emotions and your inner voice, while I'm Good actually gets into making shame guilt, as she puts it, visible to us and kind of puts it out in the open. She's also written 3 books and has a podcast of her own. And she is going to be talking to us about kind of the forbidden subject of shame and guilt. And really, shame guilt, which she says is not shame guilt. Welcome to the show, Lois.
Thank you, and thank you for the intro. It's exactly what I'm doing. I'm exposing shame guilt so we can live with our higher self.
So tell us, you made it very specific in the intro and the information you sent me that it's not shame and guilt you're talking about, it's actually shame guilt. So tell us the dissemination there.
Okay, having shame and guilt puts our mind into a dichotomy, because some people say shame is bad and guilt is good because we need guilt to be moral. Well, that's not true, because we live with our higher self. We live with our God self. We don't need guilt to teach us to be victims. So, shame, as you know, we have 2 nervous systems. We have the unconscious nervous system and the conscious nervous system. Shame rides on the unconscious nervous system, and guilt rides on the conscious nervous system. But it's the same energy. It's just different names because it's in different locations of our body. Now, in the medical field, if you have a virus in your brain, they call it meningitis. If you have the same virus in your kidneys, they call it nephritis. If you have the same virus in your liver, they call it cirrhosis. If you have this heart, they call it carditis. So you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
It makes it confusing to us when we're dealing with the same energy. And guilt potentiates shame, and shame potentiates guilt. It's a vicious cycle. So when you put it together, the shame-guilt energy, then it becomes a whole piece rather than fragments, and you can more or less understand its trickery and how to identify it, release it, and avoid it. We have to get out of the shame-guilt situation and say that it's one piece.
And it really is, you talk about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And our conscious mind, which, obviously we know is what we're talking about right now. In talking to each other, we're using our conscious mind. Our subconscious mind is tied to our autonomic nervous system. We'll get that out.
Correct.
And it kind of happens automatically. And you say that's where, listening to you, you're saying that's where shame lies, and guilt is something that we're consciously dealing with. But we're still a whole.
A whole. We are whole, and that is whole. And if I might digress, that we all know about the love energy. And love energy gives us what? Confidence and beauty and joy, compassion.
Peace.
We're intuitive,
yeah.
Ease. All of those things come from our love energy. And on the other side, we have shame-guilt energy. Shame-guilt energy turns our compassion to depression. It turns our intuition to anxiety. And it turns our passion into anger. It just switches our positive side of our emotion to its negative side. Each emotion has a positive and a negative side. When we're in the love energy, we show the positive side. When we're in shame guilt energy, we see the negative side.
So I'm going to read from, I'm pulling from your website here, and you
Okay.
say, I'm just going to read it so I get it right. It says, shame and guilt are rooted within the matrix of everyone's life. No one is spared. They are the most dangerous threat to our personal power and to our very life. Shame and guilt cannot destroy our powerful emotions, but they charge our positive emotions to negative ones. Explain that to me just a little bit.
What happens to your computer when you get a computer virus?
It shuts down your system.
Right, and sometimes your Microsoft Word doesn't work and my hard drive doesn't work. I mean, it's like, everybody has a different experience. And the only way to have your computer working again is you have a virus removal program. Well, we, as you know, are energy beings. We have various lines within us, and we're governed by the spiritual light and the light of our body, and that's all energy.
Right.
Shame, guilt is a negative energy that intersects with us when we call ourselves stupid or we can't do it. We're shaming ourselves or bringing shame, guilt energy into us, or someone else says, you're not capable of this, and we accept it from other people, or we have to do certain things that we don't want to be, and we become victims. So this shame, guilt energy coming into us from every corner, every person, every authority, and also from our inner critic, who we can make friends with. So it's like a computer virus that makes us not work properly. Shame, guilt energy turns our positive emotions to negative ones. It alters our brain in different ways that we cannot get out of confusion. When you're in a confused state, you're probably dealing with shame, guilt energy. And it also alters our physical nature because it affects the meridians within our body. The thing is, it affects our spiritual connection to our spiritual self. It's like, here we are talking to God. I have my cell phone. I'm talking to God, and there's static on the line. It's shame, guilt energy that's causing static, and I can't hear my higher self. I can't access my higher self because shame, guilt is making static on the line. Like we had problems in the beginning. We had static on the line.
Mm.
And that's what shame, guilt energy does to us. So I feel it's the most dangerous thing that happens to us because it alters our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies all at once.
Yeah, in fact, you go on to say shame and guilt target our soul and blacken our spirit in our attempts for peace, love, creativity, and joy, which are pretty strong words.
Yes, because shame, guilt is a black negative energy that covers us, and therefore we can't see it. It's it's etherical, but it's physical. I think you understand that
Sure.
because of your show, that you just have to take the cover off of us, which is removing the shame, guilt energy, and we are who we are. We're beautiful spiritual beings. But shame, guilt energy has caused static on the line, has made us become not knowing why we can't access our higher self, why we can't move forward.
So tell us, how does one, because you state in here that no one escapes this, that everybody has this. How does one address this shame guilt issue and move forward?
Okay, the first thing is that's why I call myself a shame guilt educator, because we don't know. We don't know what shame guilt is because our culture taught us to use it, and we think that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say shame and guilt. They say shame and guilt is normal. And I said, how can a negative, disruptive, dangerous energy be normal when we're beautiful human beings? It's not normal. It's an outside force placed upon humanity. It's another program that needs us. We don't need it. It's sort of like a parasite. It robs us of our light energy. It feeds off of our light energy. So it needs us. That's why it feels so strong. We do not need shame guilt energy. We are programmed. We are a human. We are beautiful spiritual beings who live by the grace of God and our God self. And shame guilt is our biggest enemy because it robs us of our light energy, our light body. That's the most important thing we have in humanity. And now it's even more important to express our light energy because of all the negativeness that's in the world today. That's another story. But we need to express who we are, and shame guilt energy stops us, blocks us. Now we have to identify it by learning what is shame guilt words, how do they feel to us, and we just say no to them. And then we have to find the shame guilt energy that we collected over the course of our lives, and we can do that. And once we do that, we can release it, and we can avoid it by knowing someone is shaming us, so we walk away.
So you talk about your soul readings, which your books are kind of a accumulation of your soul readings as far as I've been able to find out. So tell us about a soul reading and what it does to help with this process.
Well, I have done soul readings for people who have asked me to read what their soul is saying. Once I found out I had that ability when I released a lot of shame guilt that I carried over my lifetime. And then immediately I start being able to, you can say channel or just talk to, a higher dimension. And sometimes the soul reading, it could be 3 or 4 pages or 2 or 3 sentences, depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have been able to write, some people, I don't know what to call it, but it's of a higher dimension. And it's the way the cadence of the words are made. It's in English, but it's a different energy that has a higher frequency. So I invite people to read these words, and I have it on my website when they feel like they're in shame guilt energy, because it lifts you out of this hole of shame guilt energy into a higher frequency, so at least you can make a decision and live out of shame guilt.
So, what led up to you coming to this point? Doing the films to show people about this shame guilt issue and the soul readings that you've done.
Well, I was very successful in my life. I even started the first kidney hemodialysis unit, and that started, a tour throughout the country and things of that sort. And I wrote many things. I was in open heart surgery, so I was very successful, even though I had severe traumas in my childhood, which started to cascade upon me when I was in my 40s with severe migraine headaches and depression. And at 50, I was told that I only had 1 or 2 years to live because of the brain traumas I had and the various bones and the faulty liver because of all the migraine headaches. So I had to find a way to heal because I didn't feel like I was supposed to die. So that got me on the road of helping me to find a way to heal. And one person in my group, psychology group, how we go into groups, they said, "What do you do about shame?" And I said, that's an odd word. This is like 30 years ago. And I said, "That's an odd word." And I started playing with that word, and having had a near-death experience in childhood, I had access to, let's say, more information, and I was able to put together that the shame was the reason that I had depression and anxiety, anger, and suicidal thoughts. And once I decided that I didn't have to go to therapy for each anxiety and other therapies for anger and depression. I just had to get rid of the shame guilt. And I was so ecstatic that I found a way to find it and release it. And then I changed and I healed. And then people came to me and they said, Lois, what are you doing? You look younger and you're healthy. And I said, I'm just getting rid of shame and guilt. And so they did what I teach, and they also got healed. And that's how I got involved in this. However, I was giving lectures and people were saying, I don't understand what you're talking about, Lois. I don't see what you see. So I said, oh, I have to go to film school so I can make a film about what I see so people can understand what I'm talking about. And that's how I developed the films.
So,
because how to show what shame guilt is.
right. And I think, it's hard for people to understand. I understand shame. I understand guilt. And I do understand the fact that they really are part of the same thing in the whole. To me, one just kind of comes from within, and the guilt is an outward feeling with it, right?
Right. That's very well put. Thank you.
So, in doing that, and we've all experienced it. There's things that I look back and I felt shame in my life about, and I felt guilt about in my life. I really don't have that anymore, and maybe I've discovered some ways of my own to deal with those things. But someone, the people that listen to the show, we're always looking for ways of approaching this. And I know you educate on this and you teach people how to overcome this. So what can one do that's really dealing with overcoming this shame or this guilt and that they're feeling?
Okay, the first thing is get out of guilt. Get out of shame. I'm sure that you've heard of David Hawkins and his percentages of energy for each emotion.
Yes.
Okay, he had placed enlightenment at 700,000 to the hour. 30 zeros after 700,000.
Right.
That's what he categorized enlightenment as. And that's huge.
Right.
And then we go down the funnel to joy and peace and love. And at 200, it changes to anger and hurt and the rest of our negative emotions. And guess what the last one is?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
It's guilt. Okay? And guilt comes in at a 10.
So the lowest vibration, the lowest frequency.
Guilt is the lowest vibration a human can inhabit it to be alive. After guilt, there's nothing. It's suicide. People commit suicide from guilt, and you can understand that because a lot of the suicidals come from, I'm not good enough to be here. So when you're in guilt, you're in the lowest vibration that you can inhabit as a human being. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
So I'm like, just get out of guilt. And you can get out of guilt by reading some of my work, or you can have regret. Regret's healthier than guilt. As you know, regret leads you to, well, I shouldn't have done that, but maybe I will do this instead. I'll teach this, or I give this person this, or it's a actionable state. For instance, I had someone come to me because they were in severe guilt because they couldn't help their alcoholic mother heal. And she died, and the daughter felt so guilty because she couldn't help her. And well, that's, not always possible. So to get out of the guilt, she switched to regret and started programs for alcoholic and helped them to redesign their life. And that's how she got out of the guilt. And then she kept on climbing the staircase. But we got to get out of guilt. So if that's the message today, get out of guilt. It can only hurt you. Find remorse or regret or some other anger. Anything's better than guilt.
Well, yeah, if guilt being that lowest vibration, it would make sense, and even regret and
Regret's
anger.
low too, but
Yeah,
it's better than guilt.
yeah. Well, and
We got to take what we can get here.
yeah, at least if
I
you're
mean,
angry about it, there's something you can do about it, right?
exactly. But what can you do about guilt?
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
This is a sad subject, but it has to be said. And guilt and shame only have one defect.
What's that?
It dissolves in detection. Isn't that interesting? So once you find it within your life as a child or something, you can work with it and it can dissolve because it dissolves in detection. So now you know why it was always said never talk about it. That's the way they could keep you in shame and guilt, because if you never talked about it, you never exposed it.
Yeah, well, and I have a friend who always tells me if you can't feel, you can't heal, right? So as long as you keep it down there, you don't have to feel anything, right?
Right, right. So that's one of my messages today. And also on my website, I have 500 questions, one answer. And if you sign up for my newsletter, which is free, you'll get 25 questions and answers every week, teaching you what shame guilt is. So I teach you 500 ways that we can shame ourselves or people can shame us. So we have to learn our enemy.
Right.
How do you win? Know thy enemy. So that's who I am. I'm teaching the enemy of shame and guilt so we can kick it out of our lives.
Well, and it sounds like what you're doing is, as people talk to you, you're bringing that up and making them face it, because until they face it, until they realize it, and once they do that, then it can be done away with and
like that. Yeah. Like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Once she saw Toto pull the curtain back and see a little old man, bald and gray, with puffing smoke, shame guilt's a puff of smoke.
Yeah. I like that. Tell us how can people get a hold of you to talk to you and get your newsletter and those types of things?
Go to loishollis.com, LOISHOLLIS.com. And you can also reach my films there also, or you can go to imgoodfilm.com and look at them there.
And then are the films available right then?
Yes, you can press play and they're free.
They're free? Okay, that was my question.
And my husband sings.
Excellent. And I remember I started to watch the film earlier today as I was doing a little research on you. They didn't seem like they were long films. They were pretty easy to understand and to follow.
13 to 15 minutes because I'm given a subject that's, you need to kind of think about it, because I'm turning your head around and saying something that you never heard before. But then once your soul hears it, you go, oh my goodness, that's right. So it's very digestible. In our modern age, we can't have anything more than 10, 15 minutes.
That's right. And I know you also have a podcast. Let's quickly, before we're out of time, tell people how to find your podcast too.
No, I don't have one yet, but okay. I'm wanting to have one. It's in my brain, so you must be psychic and picking that up. Okay. And I haven't gotten there yet, but I have many podcasts on loishollis.com. And you can listen to them there and find out how different people go through the shame guilt maze, because we're all different. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that shame guilt is different. It just affects us differently. And that's why it's harder to talk about or digest, because everybody has a different experience, like a computer virus.
Well, and I think maybe that's where I got the podcast, because I remember they were just kind of short little snippets that you could watch or see on there, and that's probably where I got the podcast. Mm-hmm. But interesting stuff. You can find Lois again at loishollis.com, and if you want to give her a call, she will talk to you about this.
I am available as well.
All right, excellent. So definitely find her there. You can find me at lifebydesign.institute or spiritualrevolutionradio.com. If you want to be on the show, contact me there and let me know what your subject is, and we'll be in touch to talk about it. Any last words you'd like to say in our last 20 seconds here?
Shame, guilt is not ours to own or to give. Never ever say my shame. It is the shame. You don't own it.
Got it. So let that stuff go. Thank you for sharing with us today.
The shame.
All right. Love and peace, everyone. Take care.
This has been Spiritual Revolution Radio with Dr. Will Miller. For more information or to be a guest, please visit lifebydesign.institute. Join us next week for another edition of Spiritual Revolution Radio with your host, Dr. Will Miller. This has been a production from a podcast studio.